everyone here today, and thank you for taking the time out to learn a thing or two about cybersecurity and how you can better protect your business. As many of you know, today is Are You OK Day, and I would like to say it is so good to see so many faces on this call, both new and old. CWC is all about supporting our network and our community, and I'm sure I speak for all members when I say that our door is always open. As many of you know, my full-time role is as Sales and Marketing Director for RackCorp Secure Cloud. And for those of you who don't know, RackCorp is an Australian-owned infrastructure as a service provider with a presence in 27 data centers across 15 countries. And we specialize in providing hosting for clients with mission-critical applications and requirements. We have many clients that are large e-commerce companies, insurance companies, payment gateway providers, and government agencies. And we invested heavily over the past 5 years in a range of security solutions, such as security information and event management, network intrusion detection, host intrusion detection, and file integrity monitoring. And we have fully integrated these into our platform. And it's actually become a major point of differentiation between us and the other public clouds. So like Martin and the team at Devicie, I spend much of my day at RackCorp having conversations about cybersecurity and how to better protect businesses from threats. Like Martin, I'm also very passionate about cybersecurity and practicing good cyber hygiene, as I've witnessed firsthand the absolute devastation that can occur when you get it wrong. Having built many businesses myself over the years, what's most scary to me is that you can have a business that you've invested millions of dollars and spent years building into a very successful entity. And literally within hours, it can be completely destroyed by an external party that's probably sitting behind a computer 10,000 kilometers away. And in many of these cases, the door had been opened unknowingly by an existing staff member. In my honest opinion, and from what I see on a day-to-day basis, many directors are still asleep at the wheel when it comes to protecting their business from cyber threats. And it does show in the statistics. On that note, I'm going to introduce you to my good friend and CWC Platinum member, Martin, who will show you how things should be done. But before I do, let me tell you a little bit about Martin. Martin is a cybersecurity and data protection expert and leader with a passion for helping organizations to leverage technology securely. With over 20 years experience as a security architect, chief information security officer, and security consultant, Martin has helped countless organizations to scope and build customized and cost-efficient solutions that facilitate business processes while protecting and enabling stakeholders. Most of his career has been within large, high-risk industries, including banking and insurance, government, wagering, and education. Martin is a successful entrepreneur, having co-founded Australian MSSP Secure Measure, which helps companies defend themselves against cybercrime and the risks posed by increasing layers of technology and remote workspaces. In 2019, Martin co-founded Devicie to make uncompromising device security. Now, let me just say, CWC has been founded on and remains underpinned by trust and the unquestionable character and integrity of its members. And Martin is a perfect example of this. He's trustworthy, intelligent, determined, and loves to have a laugh. On that note, it's over to you, mate.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Apologies for the technical hiccups. So today, thank you very much for joining, me and everyone else here to discuss end user device security. And this is something that is very important to me. It's something I've worked in this field for a very long time, and it's never been a more interesting time to work in this field. The challenges have never been more difficult, in terms of the threats and also the complexity of supporting users. So let's get on with today's discussion. as I mentioned, I'm Martin McGregor. I've started Devicie with my two founders who you see on the screen here, Jose and Jason. Our experience, dealing with end user devices goes back about 20 years. And what I'm always surprised about is, almost every organization now, it's been quite a transition. Over that last 20 years, we've really become dependent on employee devices. Everybody's working from a device. That never really used to be the case. And I actually even remember, when I first started working in technology, I'd still have to convince businesses that this was a good idea. But now, the horse is bolted and everybody's doing this. And, some of the things that I've learned over, these years in terms of how to manage these have really gone into forming the way that we operate and why we do the things that we do. And, fundamentally, I believe that security and, especially on employee devices should never be a barrier to doing business. Should never, ever slow body down. And personally, I don't believe that employees should be IT experts or security experts to be able to do their job. In my opinion, I think we all need to do a little bit better. Often we'll say, you'll hear people refer to end users as the weakest link. It's not the sort of language I like to use. I don't think that's fair. I think what we should be doing as organizations is setting up our employees so that they can operate really effectively. And if you don't mind, let me just share you a quick story to show you why I really believe that the key to getting really great security outcomes is enabling a business first. And I used to be head of security at William Hill, the bookmaking company, and they used to have an annual competition every year where you could bring a product idea, and there was a whole process of pitching that, and they would knock out teams and all that sort of stuff. And finally, one team would be chosen by the executive as the product that the business would build for in the following year. And the idea that I came up with was a security product, but even my team members were saying, "Don't tell anyone it's a security thing. Don't. No one will want to build it." What we were really doing was we were helping users on board really easily. So instead of them coming to our website, filling in forms, their name and address, all of that sort of stuff, pulling out ID cards that have to take photos of their credit card, photos of their driver's license, and send it in for all of the KYC requirements for the anti-money laundering laws. Instead of them going through that process, we built a little technology where they could pull out their phone, scan their driver's license, scan their credit card. It would pick up all their name, their ID information, everything like that. And it would go through the process of validating that user incredibly quickly. And so for the end user, what they got was, instead of having to wait days before they could place a bet and withdraw the money, they could place a bet within minutes. They could withdraw because we'd automated all the processes for gathering their data and validating that they were who they said they were. And ultimately, it gave us fantastic security, and that's what we were trying to achieve. But the reason the business picked that project and the reason the business wanted to build that wasn't the security benefits. It was because of the benefits to end users and making it easier for them to use their systems. And that's a philosophy that I think is really important for us to carry forward when we think how we're going to apply and manage security for end users. We can't create barriers that make it more difficult for them. We have to enable them. So, look, I'm sure everybody here, for the most part, Dave's even touched on it. We're all familiar with cybercrime at the moment, and what an issue that is. It's certainly been exacerbated by the pandemic. Even prior to that, we saw 80% of cyber attacks that were successful were attacking end user devices or employee devices. And when the pandemic hit, we saw cybercrime increase 600%. There's some more challenges that have made these problems even worse. One of them is there's been a huge rush to digital transformation. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. A lot of organizations are moving to the cloud. They're prioritizing those projects, trying to get them in quicker because they're trying to support remote users, remote workers. And all of those are creating, an even bigger problem from the perspective of cybercrime. And you'd all be familiar with the news reports. It's every week now, really, that we're hearing about large organizations around the world dealing with ransomware. And that's besides the organizations that don't report. So things are absolutely out of control, and they're not necessarily getting all that much better. And the challenge for organizations is, this is very complicated. Dealing with cybercrime requires many layers of security. It's not just one approach. You can't just install, some antivirus software and hope that everything's going to be okay. But the challenge for organizations is they're even struggling to get basics done, like being able to patch vulnerabilities across their organization and keep systems up to date. So a good example of how things have changed, and we have more and more users working remotely than ever, is because IT teams have struggled to set up employee devices with everything that they need. So all the apps that they need to work, all the files that they need to work, it takes a lot of effort, and there's always gaps. What we're typically doing, and what organizations are often doing these days, is they're allowing end users to have admin permission on their devices, local admin. And unfortunately, this is a challenge. We had a customer of ours who said that, that's why Santa Claus is there. He said they were handing out admin privileges like it was Christmas. Every time someone had a challenge and IT couldn't resolve it, they would give the employees admin access so they could resolve it themselves. And ultimately, if we don't provide employees what they need to work, we end up with situations like this where they need to find their own workarounds, and that only makes it more difficult for IT to manage devices going forward. So I mentioned a moment the rush to the cloud, and it's important to understand what's required for a secure transition into the cloud. Many of the barriers and the constraints of having systems in data centers or in offices actually did provide some security. Often offices would have firewalls. It'd be harder to actually get to production systems. Now with everything in the cloud, it's actually much easier. And there's often a misconception, when it comes to managing technology, especially people that don't work in technology. They often have an expectation that I'm sure the tech guys are managing IT well, but that's not really the case. And when people that work in IT are familiar with the compromises in an organization that one needs to make to be able to get the job done, and the pressures that sometimes mean that we don't get to build the systems to the standard that we'd hope to. Well, unfortunately, what we've done is those challenges that we had in IT, where we struggled to patch, where we struggled to apply good security standards, well, we've moved those same problems into the cloud. And Glenn, who's on our call today, he's got a fantastic analogy, and that's, we had a bin fire in the data center previously, and now we've moved that bin fire into the cloud, and we've now it's accessible to whoever wants to come and dig in the bin. For example, here in this picture, we've got a bunch of bin chickens now that are have access to just pluck away at our production systems as they sit in the cloud. And security, however, needs to be just as effective for remote workers now that we're in the cloud as when our systems were on premise. But for most companies in the cloud, it really is a case of them moving the problems that they had locally into the cloud, where it's actually more difficult to manage. And there's something that IT people, and especially security people, we often talk about, is in the cloud systems like AWS and Amazon, or Amazon and Azure and Google. They're so well known. The IP addresses, the systems that that operate in those areas are so well known to criminals that as soon as you build systems in the cloud in Azure or AWS, you're likely to get targeted very, much sooner than if it was in, your own private data center. So almost every employee interacts with devices these days, as we were talking about it. Everyone thinks of these challenges from their own perspective. And so if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to take everybody on a little bit of a journey. I just want to explain the challenge of managing employee devices from the different perspectives that we have in the organization. If you will, take a moment to put yourself in their shoes, that'll really help us sort of understand why this is such a challenge and why it's such a significant attack from cybercrime. So first of all, end users, the people that rock up to work, might be an accountant, it could be a developer, whoever, just need to go to work and get their job done. What does a poorly managed device really result for them? Forced workarounds, trying to find the app that they need, trying to get apps that they can collaborate with other employees. We used the example a moment ago with admin privileges. Well, a classic example is developers, and when you talk to developers about taking away their local admin, it's almost like a trigger phrase. They get quite worried about it, and the reason is because they're familiar with IT's inability to set up their environment sufficiently for them to do their work. So they need local admin. They need to be able to manage it themselves from their perspective, just so that they're not impacted by IT's inability to manage devices effectively. And often that's really their motivation. I just need to get my job done. And then we've got the IT service desk. And, when COVID struck, IT was the group of people that were left to pick up the mess. And that often is the case. With COVID, a lot of employees needed to go work from home. A lot of new laptops needed to get set up where people used to have perhaps a desktop, and IT was working around the clock, day after day, just setting up PC after PC manually, one after another, just to get employees up and running again. It's the same thing after ransomware hits. You might be familiar with when ransomware hits. A lot of the time they'll use a crypto locker and they'll lock up devices, or they'll lock up systems. Well, it's typically IT that spends all of their days and nights recovering that business and bringing them, back into a good place. And typically when it all goes wrong, they are the ones that are left to clean up the mess. And if we don't support the service desk effectively, and if we don't, give them the tools that they need so that they can work effectively and not have to do these, incredible fix-up jobs every time it goes wrong, we're going to result in problems. We're going to result in errors. We can't expect IT people. We can't expect to throw people at this problem. We've got to find better solutions. And ultimately, I don't think it's healthy for IT people. I quite often see organizations break rules, in terms of working hours and things like that for IT people, because it's just so critical that they bring the organization back back into operation, and often, it's their mental health that's compromised in the process. We have the audit teams, the compliance teams, especially when you guys might be familiar with going through third-party risk assessments. Sometimes when you're working with a larger organization and they want to look at your security posture. Well, every audit, almost everyone, it's the same thing. We see, even in very mature organizations, end user devices aren't getting the basics done. Very rarely any patching compliance. There's typically gaps in visibility. If the system doesn't have an agent on there or some software for you to monitor it, there's no way of knowing whether it's in compliance or not. And then the challenge of actually trying to provide reports means that we're pulling data from many different sources. at the same time, and that's typically falls back on the IT's shoulders again to resolve. And then we have our Scios, and often when I'm talking to Scios, they're often talking about it's only after something bad happens that the organization starts to pay attention to them, and often they can be warning their organizations for a long time. Guys, we're not patching, we're not applying security baselines effectively. And when I talk to Scios, they're not trying to get any fancy capabilities in. They're not trying to bring in machine learning and AI. They're just trying to get the basics done. They want to get patching done. They want to have visibility of their devices across the whole organization, and they want to be able to give meaningful data to their business so that they can get support to resolve these problems. Before I built Devicie, I mentioned I've built a lot of systems to manage employee devices, and I would go from organization to organization building these systems. And what would often happen is something that people that work in MSPs or manage security service providers, they'd be familiar that when you leave, the organization is often responsible for maintaining the system and the service that you've provided, and it's only their capacity to maintain that system that keeps it operational. And one of the things that I was always frustrated with was there was always such a significant skills shortage. So we would leave an organization and they wouldn't have the personnel that were skilled enough to maintain these systems, so that patching could consistently happen. When new apps were required by employees, they could be provisioned, and unfortunately, the bigger the problem gets, the longer they go without addressing these problems, the bigger the problem gets, and the bigger the task to resolve it. So there is no manual solution to this problem. That's how we've been trying to solve this for many years. When an organization has needed to manage employee devices effectively, we've thrown people at it, but the scale is too significant. Maybe when you have a small business, 5-10 users, it's feasible to have somebody in the business who sets up every new computer when a new computer arrives or a new staff member arrives. Maybe when you get to about 25-30 users, you start to have some that becomes a little bit more challenging, and you might get inconsistencies on different devices, or it might start taking somebody too much time. But really, when you start to get to 50, 100 users, we need to start looking at some kind of technology to solve these problems for us. Just the sheer number of devices, the volume of applications that organizations work with, and then the degree of updates that we see. There's constant change, there's constant security updates that need to be applied. But not only that, the threat landscape constantly changes. So we constantly have to apply new controls, new methods of blocking cyber attacks. And at the heart of this increasing problem is end users, and the universal problem of just being able to work effectively. And when you look at end user surveys, there's actually some fantastic ones that came out of the US earlier this year. A significant amount of employees that leave organizations leave because the technology environment wasn't supportive for them to get their job done, and the slowness of getting new systems or getting operational was impacting their performance. So, security compromises are something that organizations are just really doing now as a method of just remaining operational. We mentioned granting administration privileges, for example. People are putting up with machines that don't work effectively because it's easier for them than contacting the IT service desk and getting their system rebuilt. IT is working endless hours doing these repetitive tasks, rebuilding devices one after another. And as mentioned, there's no time or capacity for these organizations to get even the basics done, regardless of the tools that they have at their disposal. And of course, you show me a company that doesn't say that they're having challenges finding good IT people or good security people. And, we run a security company, and we focus in device security, and even we have huge struggles trying to find people that know what they're doing in this space. So, IT systems and the approaches that we've been using up to this day just aren't keeping up to the challenges of modern work. So, end users have become the problem, but but not really. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's unfair for IT and security people to expect people in our organizations to have the skills and the security expertise to manage their devices effectively. And it's become this impossible choice for most organizations between security and productivity, and between taking away admin privileges and keeping people happy, or between spending all day doing mundane, repetitive laptop builds and rebuilds, versus getting the important IT stuff done to move the organization forward. However, we believe that this choice doesn't have to be impossible. And in this day and age, the reality is we can't compromise the business. We're far too dependent on technology for it to slow us down. It needs to, enable us. And if our people can't do their job, it infects the efficiency of the whole organization. Because of the risk climate we're in, we can't compromise security either. And user experience, as I mentioned, is the key for us to be able to get effective security applied. For example, in this day and age, it's feasible for us to be able to send a device straight from a manufacturer to an end user where they can log on themselves, and we use automation technology to set up that device for them so that they have everything that they need to work. We automate the dumb stuff. So we leave our smart IT people available to support our people. Is really the way that we should be dealing with this. So this is, we often come back to this illustration. You guys might remember this. This was Mia. She was doing the El Paso taco ad, where her options were hard shell and soft shell, and she wanted to know why she could have both. I don't actually if you know this, but Mia, Taco Girl, actually lives in Australia now, and this has been used in memes over and over and over, for hundreds and maybe thousands of times around the world. We like to use it as well because typically organizations are compromising between user experience and device security. And as I've mentioned, the threat landscape is it's too risky for us to have an impact on security, for us to reduce the security that we have. We need to be uncompromising in how we deal with security. But at the same time, we can't create barriers for end users, and we need to make device management better for people. And we really believe that we're all in a fortunate time now where we can make those sorts of things happen. So I'll just talk a little moment about some of the innovations that we've seen out there in the marketplace that we should all be considering and looking at when we go to solve this problem. There's been some really clever innovations that have really changed what's possible. And I think that, a lot of the industry is so busy fighting, these bin chickens that they haven't noticed. We're putting out fires instead of thinking strategically about how we should solve these problems. But, there's been some incredible innovations which make it possible for us to reinvent device security. One of them is, something to keep, in the back of your mind, is agentless technologies or native technologies. I'll give you an example with Microsoft Windows 10. There's a technology called Intune, and Intune enables device management straight out of the box. So you can ship a device to an end user. They can log onto it, and all of their applications get installed, all of their files, all of their settings, all of their applications, everything that they need to work can be completely set up over the internet. And previous to Microsoft Intune, the only real way to do that was an IT person had to do that process manually. And the other thing that's really important is automation. Automation is not just operational efficiency; it's a necessity. The challenges that we need to deal with are too vast and require too much human effort for us to throw people at it. And automation reduces the likelihood of errors because hands-on and manual tasks inevitably end up with bad results and errors. And if you implement automated processes properly, they will do the same thing the right way over and over and over without a human ever having to get involved. And when I used to work for MSPs and used to build these sorts of solutions, we didn't want to build. We didn't want to do repetitive things. But who possibly would want to? Who would want to pull a computer out of a box, build it, put it back in the box, do that over and over, hundreds and hundreds of times? It's hard to get human beings doing that consistently, where that you're going to have reliable results, and it's going to be the most expensive way to tackle that issue as well. So there's what I'm really alluding to is what is often called the future state, and the future state is really what I've been characterizing as that scenario where we send a device straight to an end user, they pull it out of the box themselves, they log on. It's very intuitive, very low effort, and within 30 minutes their device is up and running. We need to design solutions like that make it easier for our end users to work and not require human beings to do all of these processes one by one. We need to stop building our own internal systems. So I still talk to many organizations that they look at these end user device problems as something unique to their business and something that they need to solve. So they go to all sorts of technology providers, and we see different business solving the same problem in so many different ways, and the cost is so high. But now we're really in a time where we're seeing SaaS solutions come onto the market, where you can subscribe to for a monthly service, for example. We're one of them, Devicie, where you can have essentially your devices managed for you with a system that's purpose built for doing that at scale. We also I also recommend using native technologies like Microsoft Intune and conditional access. These are tools that are provided by Microsoft that are often included in even many of your licensing plans. We're actually very often surprised how many organizations we go and speak to who have Intune licenses but don't make use of them. I would very much recommend those sorts of tools rather than buying a third-party tool that you need to install on the computer before you can actually manage that device. And we need to ensure that things like regular patching, especially security patches and OS application upgrades, that they just consistently happen in our organizations. And we're in a time now where we really can't afford to not have security maturity just in the way that our organizations operate. So one of the other challenges now that we live in a time where our devices are spread all across the world, many organizations used to function in a way where an employee would come into the office to visit their computer. And that was actually really easy for IT to manage. They were all in one place. It was really easy to get inventory. They were all on a local LAN. You could work out if you had gaps in your visibility or not. But now we've got devices logging into our organizations potentially all over the world. We've provided VPN access, for example, so that they can get access. And how do we keep track of them? So we need to look at solutions that give us inventory of devices, regardless of where they are. What are our devices? What's their warranty status? What applications are installed on those devices? What's their compliance posture? You know, in terms of what security controls have they got? Do they have gaps in their security posture? And then we want actionable intelligence. So we don't want IT to be trying to gather data from all of these different sources to try and get the jobs that they need done. For example, managing local admin. Who's local admin in our organization? Which devices have admin? Which devices don't have local admin? That's something that takes IT teams a lot of time to work out, but there are now tools available to us where we can, without any effort, log into a console and export the kind of reports we need to get these jobs done. So, as I keep emphasizing, the key to consistent security is make it easy for end users. And end user training is very important, and it's something that I recommend to every organization, especially in this day and age. But it's certainly we certainly need to stop blaming end users, and we need to be able to set them up so that their devices are secured and protected from cybercrime. We can't treat our end users as the last line of defense. And end users, as I keep emphasizing, they shouldn't have to be security experts anyway. And we need to actually focus on building tools and solutions that improve their working lives and make it easier and more attractive, to onboard our security controls. Make it easier for end users to actually adopt our security controls rather than making it difficult for them to use them. And if we get our end users on board, it enables the kind of security and compliance outcomes that are really otherwise, impossible. If we can get a device to an end user and they can set it up themselves and log on relatively simply, and in that process we can automate applying all of our security controls, it's the way that we get to these non-compromising scenarios where we have 100% visibility and control of every device in our organization. This doesn't have to be a nirvana that was way too expensive to get to previously. The technology landscape that we're living with now really does enable these kind of outcomes. So the key takeaways today for everybody is we need to stop making this IT's problem, and let them, letting them deal with the fallout of bad end user device management. And we need to invest in technology and take away the tedious, monotonous work that is so error prone to, when people have to do it. There are new ways to look at these problems. So let's try to stop solving it the same way that we always have. It's never worked well, especially since remote work and cybercrime got out of control. So don't compromise user experience or security. We don't have to. Let's focus on enabling our end users, understanding their requirements and how we can fulfill them. It's the key to getting the kind of coverage that we need to get to protect our organizations, in this day and age. And if we enable the business and we use, the constraints, that we find in every business, constraints are actually a fantastic thing. It's what constraints, result in innovation. And now we've got all of these constraints like end users having to work from home. Well, the challenge is how do we keep them safe? And it's an exciting time to be able to solve these challenges. I'm happy to say we're seeing organizations really with tremendous outcomes that really weren't feasible 5, 10, and 20 years ago.
Fantastic, Martin.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant, mate. Well done. I want to say thank you for taking the time out to learn a thing or two today about cybersecurity and how you can better protect your business. And a huge thank you to Martin for such an insightful presentation. It is greatly appreciated, mate.